On. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us. My name is Minnie Jain and I work with an NGO based in the UK called the Flow Partnership. But the name says it all. We work in partnership with various ground level organizations across the world. And the aim behind the Flow Partnership when it was set up was to enable communities to revive community-driven decentralized water management, for communities to revive their water sources, whether they're experiencing droughts or they're experiencing floods. So we've been working with various water warriors and water, how do I say, leading lights in this world, such as Rajendra Singh in India, who work with ground level communities. That is where a lot of wisdom resides, the wisdom to keep your landscapes healthy so they never actually do go into losing their water cycle and become, which then when it gets broken, which then leads to a lot of stress and strife and migration and all the allied associated problems that come with no water in the villages. So working with various people and communities, we realize that there is so much community, traditional community wisdom, which slowly for various regions is either getting lost, or if it is successfully being practiced, it's not shared widely enough. And we then did a project in India which recorded this community, a particular community wisdom around constructing small earthen check dams, which in Rajasthan they call johats, and they hold the monsoon water when it falls, and if they're placed strategically in the landscape, how sprinkling of them could eventually revive a river. This work was done by Rajendra Singh and his team, and they've revived not one, not two, but many, many rivers, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we found that such work is also happening across the world. So we worked with people in Europe, in Colombia, and from there, the idea of community water maps and community traditional wisdom water school was born. So the water school is online. It's at, I'll put in the link, it's at waterways.world, but which is starting to host different methods that communities use to manage floods and droughts, to revive their water sources, to build ponds, to build water bodies. So you'll find a lot over there. We have a lot for India at the moment, and this is our attempt at moving into what would be useful for the African continent. And it's wonderful to actually meet, work with this together with all of you who come for the meetings from the different countries in Africa. And we really look forward to building a very powerful and useful community water map of Africa with the different methods that we can then share widely, not just with African people and countries, but also across the world. So I'll stop there, and then we can, if in the Q&A, and once we've seen some of this wonderful work that I'm really looking forward to see from being presented by Nelson today, and then we will have a Q&A, and I look forward, if you have any questions, do feel free to ask us. Over to you, John. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Minnie. Thanks so much. I know there's so much to say about it, but that was a great summary. So now we're going to invite Nelson Mudzingwa to make a presentation on their efforts and the community in Shashe's efforts to harvest water. I don't want to say a lot, but just to say I've known Nelson for I think it's probably nearly 20 years now, and we've sort of worked together in various ways. And I mean, the thing about Nelson is that he's very politically aware with all his work with Zimsoff and La Via Campesina and all of that, but he's also very rooted as a farmer on the ground and very action oriented. Yeah, I think we're hearing about experiences on the ground that are happening and spreading. So thanks so much, Nelson, for agreeing to make this presentation, and welcome, and over to you. And I'm guessing you'll want to share your screen. I think Minnie's set it up so that you can share your screen, but you might want to say some things first. So over to you, Nelson.
Thank you so much, John. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. I'm Nelson Mudzingwa. Just a little bit of my background is that I actually moved from rhetoric to practice. In fact, I graduated from that process where initially I was one of the extension officers of an organization that is called Association of Zimbabwe Traditional Environmental Conservationists, talking a lot about nature conservation as a key area that we're focusing as an organization, with very deep roots into the culture and cosmovision of indigenous people of Zimbabwe and where they've related to biodiversity, and primarily focusing very much into the practices on the soil and into the practices on the entire biodiversity and all the ecosystems that are included. So from there, I actually became one of the farmers, believing that we have to move from where we just talk, but we have to show examples where farmers can learn from what we are doing, and then they become part of us by learning from our best practices. So I became part of the Shashe Agroecology School Initiative as one of the co-founders of it, and at the same time supporting the community in the Shashe block of farms who were just resettled after the first reclaim reform program, and then became later on a volunteer coordinator to Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Farmers Forum, and graduating again to become a substantive national coordinator of Zimsoff, a post that I still hold. But at the same time, one of the most important farmers that are on the ground for Zimsoff as member to the Shashe Smallholder Farmers Organization, and at the same time, which is a member to the central cluster. So I will try to share my screen and also share my experiences with what we are doing here in the Shashe block of farms, having getting resettled.
How do you mute the dogs?
the dogs, yeah. Sorry.
No, it's lovely. It's lovely, Nelson. It's lovely to hear life behind on the farm coming across with your work.
I'm trying to share the full screen here. Are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen. I can see it.
Yes. Now where do I click to share the full screen?
I think that's it there, the way your arrow is now.
Just a quick word while Nelson's presentation comes online. May I request everyone to mute their microphones, please? Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to share our experiences with farmers in the Shashe block of farms who actually came in this area. They were officially resettled 2002, but they occupied land 2000. And on the official list, we have 380 families who actually were resettled into 6 farms that cover 15,020 hectares. So the rest of this land has been just for cattle ranching, and nothing was just growing here besides just natural veld and the grasslands. Yeah. And now this is part of Ward 6 and 33 of Masvingo district, and is to the north of Masvingo district, as you can see on the map of Zimbabwe. This is Masvingo province, and where that blue dot is where the block of farms are. The area actually receives an average of 400 millimeters of rainfall. When we say this is a good season, we will be talking of 400 millimeters, and the only best year that we have recorded much is only this past season, where we recorded over 700 millimeters of rainfall, but many of our years has been 400 or even less. So this area we are talking about, for us maybe to really understand from the map of Zimbabwe, you can see where the arrow is pointing to. That's the Shashe block of farms. And there is the Shashe River that flows into Tokwe River, and then Tokwe River goes into Runde River, and then it flows to Sabe and it goes to the Indian Ocean. So this is how much of the water that many of our catchment areas you find we are just exporting quite huge volumes of water without taking care of them. So the example of the Shashe block of farms was coming on board to actually try to build some kind of an idea on how we can harvest water, and then we make use of it in the future. So to come closer to the area, this is the Shashe River, which flows down to a dam that is just below the Shashe block of farms. The Shashe block of farms are this area, and this is where I am speaking from. From on the map, you can see that icon here is actually indicating the place where I am, and I'm talking about the rest of this area, which is just to the east of Shashe River, and which flows into Muji Dam. And there are some small rivers that goes into that flows into Shashe River, like the Shombe, which is this one. Then there is the Swine River, which is this small river, which also just flows into Shashe River. And then there is another stream again, which is called Chiraba, which flows down to the Shashe River. So this is the rest of the catchment area where you find a lot of water was just being exported from this area, but yet the area is very dry. But just to start with, on the socio-economic activities that this community, they started to, they were getting resettled. There were many indicators that you could actually diversify your production, and nevertheless to just focus on the former to cattle ranching, but to diversify into many forms of production. So there was a lot to work on reviving local seed systems, and this is the current situation that we are seeing, that we have almost like developed one state-of-the-art seed archive, heritage archive that has been developed and keeping quite a lot of seed. And this is at household level, and there are many households that are actually again following this kind of an example to develop their own seed banks. But the indicators are that you have over 200 households which are actually participating into seed saving and exchanging diverse seed varieties, particularly of the small grains that do very well, and pulses, as well as even oils. And there is quite a lot of work again that is going along with bringing awareness to consumers on eating local food, and also reaching out to many other consumers, even in the urban areas, to indicate that it is very important to eat healthy food that you can simply produce from the soil, and not even to buy from the shop, because we believe food must come from the shop, not come from the soil, not come from the shop. We also very much into working on the soil. So the resettled farmers have converted the once grazing land to food forests, like you can see on the photos, different food crops that are just growing, and quite a very rich green color coming out is an indicator to say there's a lot that is being done, especially on water.
Sorry. Okay, he's muted. Go ahead.
We actually grow diverse varieties of cereals, pulses, oils, fruits, tubers, and roots. And we have a different kind of techniques that we are practicing in our arable lands, such as cover cropping, mulching, agroforestry, intercropping, and crop rotation. And these are being applied at farmer level, because we believe if you the household unit, and as far as water management is concerned, you will actually have a very huge impact as you bring all the numbers together and maybe focus now on a much bigger catchment area that will be landscape or catchment area that you will be working on. Apart from cattle, we've also introduced quite a number of other livestock species. These are just examples, like the pigs and the guinea fowls, the chickens, and these are just examples. Many different farmers, like you can hear the sound that is coming out here is the guinea fowls. We also keep guinea fowls, we keep pigeons, we keep pigs, we keep cattle, goats, sheep, rabbits, and many other livestock. And these different kind of livestock are actually our major source of income, and also they are a very major source of manure that we use to feed ourselves, because we believe in feeding the soils so that the soil can feed the plants. And if the soil is healthy, we believe it has the capacity to hold onto higher levels of moisture, because it will be a living soil. So the Shashe block of farms has become a food basket from a Shingo district, especially when the seasons are very good, like what we are seeing right now on the ground. We have lots of cereals that we are delivering to the grain marketing board. We have lots of cereals that we are stocking at our own households, and lots of cereals and other crop varieties that we are exchanging and doing a lot of bartering at local level to increase sources of income, and at the same time earning a living out of the income that we get, or even the items that we can get from those who could be trying to do bartering with us. So where this whole project is coming from is from our work with the organization I've talked about, the Association of Zimbabwe Traditional Environmental Conservationists, whereby there was this whole discussion about spirituality and cosmovision, and this focusing very much on the three worlds, as you can see on the diagram. Here we have the natural world. On the natural world, we are talking about the whole flora and fauna, and the way that is related to the spiritual world. What is that connection that the natural world has to do with the spiritual world? What are the messages that can come from the spiritual world going via the natural world to reach the social world? The social world is all about us, whether we are black or white, and whether we are coming from any region, or whether we are coming from a different ethnic group. But here we looking at how we relate to each other, how we communicate, and how we support each other, and how the messages from the spiritual world can be communicated to us via the natural world. There are lots of different kinds of signs that we can interpret. So therefore, it is very, very important to keep these three worlds intact for us as human beings to be able to survive. So we put a lot of value then now to the soil, to the water, and to all the seeds of nature. So as we looking on the inspiration where all this was coming from, we now looking at the idea that we ended up coming up with in the Shashe block of farms.
So, welcome to new arrivals. Could you put your on mute? Anyone who's just arrived, if you could put your microphone on mute. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the idea to establish now the Shashe Agroecology School was to set up some kind of...
Maybe just mute them. John, you can mute people. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. So, Minnie, if that happens again, I think as the host, you can mute people. Go ahead, Nelson.
Okay.
I have been trying, but somehow it doesn't always work. But yes, I'm keeping an eye on that. Thanks, John.
So the idea was to establish the Shashe Agroecology School was based on our understanding on the three worlds. and that we have to work with water, we have to work with our soils, and we want to work with living seeds. And we want to showcase, first of all, to our neighbors what we mean by maybe water harvesting, or what we mean by improving soil fertility, or what we mean by increasing diversity at household level. So these examples we actually set into what we call centers of excellence. And the centers of excellence are family farms that were designed now to develop into some form of living examples that can provide farmer-to-farmer training to the other farmers. And as I indicated, priority being given to soil and water. We were also very much inspired by the work that was done by the late Zafania Pini on rainwater harvesting, where many of our members had quite a lot of physical visits to his homestead, to the Sawane district, and also learning from quite a lot of his videos that I've actually indicated on this slide. For those who might be interested to learn about Mr. Piri, you can actually download those videos, and you can learn from his best practices when it comes to water harvesting and conservation. So why did we decide to, what motivated us to go into water harvesting? As we were moving around, coming into a new land, anyone has got his own motive, and would want to start something new, and whether you got training or you don't have any training. So there was a lot of land clearing that was beginning as the new farmers were being resettled, and lots of trees were just being cut down, and that actually impacted on a already very bad water cycle, which was just 400 millimeters, now reducing even to some 100 plus millimeters per annum, and leading to a lot of land degradation and a lot of soils being exposed to runoff, and a lot of gullies, forming in the different areas. And the farmers were actually learning from all these examples and seeing what could be the cause and what could be the effect maybe in the long term. And we were also seeing siltation. When we came here 2000, we realized that the Shashe River was just a flowing river, but some few years into coming onto it, you could see that the rest of it was actually getting silted, and we also were taking records, learning from the different years how the rainfall pattern is shaping itself, whether it is getting normal or is decreasing, and the results actually indicated to us that of course there was this climate change being talked about, but what could be the bad ways of managing our landscape that we could have been doing. So we started to come up with some different strategies, and this was actually coming out of the farmers, the farmers discussing maybe at a working party, or the farmers discussing working from the church, or the farmers discussing at a beer hall, where you could have lots of different informal discussions, which resulted into organizing proper awareness meetings in the 6 farms to learn from what is happening in each and every farm, and how people are seeing their landscape, whether it's degrading, whether there's a lot of gully formation or soil erosion taking place. And so there were lots of different transit walks that were organized in the different farms, right? And there were a lot of other on-site training that we organized, where people could learn how to use an airframe, design a dead level control, and how they can work onto their soils and reduce a lot of siltation into different streams, or even local earth dams that we found here. We also set up some demonstration structures where farmers will come and learn from what I will be doing, because the point was that we should not continue just to talk about it, but we have to at some point try to showcase where living examples are very easy to train those farmers that may be interested to learn from our experiences. So we started again to work with the farmers on the different practices that were coming out of the farmers. Here we looking at the farmer-to-farmer learning, yeah, on upland and downland water harvesting structures. When we are looking on upland, we are saying what are the techniques that we can, we're saying what are the techniques that you can actually practice above the ground, where you don't need to open the soil, but what are the structures that you can put on the soil that can help you save the soil and at the same time reduce the flow of water. Such examples were the stone walls that we were setting up with farmers coming to learn from our experiences, and we also worked on the downland where we were actually digging structures, the earth dams. It's one of those examples where we could open up small earth dams on our arable land to reduce the flow of water. And we also were setting up dead level contours, using the A-frame to set up the dead level contours on the different family farms, at least to demonstrate and let that farmer continue to improve on his own and design his own land in the way he wants it to look like. So there were practitioners that were demonstrating their practices, and farmers learning by doing, and knowledge spreading by action, not just by talking, but many people working onto their soils because they were seeing some indicators that my soil is actually being washed away by water. We also looked on some different techniques at the centers of excellence, such as interlocked keyhole beds being designed. These help to reduce runoff and increase seepage of water into the soil. We also had some examples where we had agroforestry established, and we also had some examples where we did a lot of work on green cover crops, bringing in a lot of pulses and other different legumes onto the different family farms, at least to establish some demonstration sites and farmers beginning to develop and learn from those living examples. The results that we have seen so far is that we have earth dams that are actually, I would indicate, like, for example, the previous season, or my own experience at my own household. Our soils here were not washed away. The structures that we have put onto the land were able to withstand the shocks of the floods that we recorded this year, and were able to hold back on to any runoff and making the soil to seep into the ground without taking away our soils. On the contours, you can see the volumes of water that we have estimated to have harvested from the earth dams, and the volumes of water that we have estimated to harvest from the contours, just giving some examples from maybe one family farm that is these structures in place. As a result of the runoff and its collection into the earth dams, we have realized that there's quite a lot of soil that we began at the end of every season. We will collect back our soils back to the land where it was washed, and this soil is very, very rich. It's very very fertile, and it is able to, if you grow crops on the soil, the silt that we have harvested from the earth dams, you will see that it will be very rich, and you will have very healthy plants coming out of that silt. So the work of harvesting water goes along with the work to harvest your soil and keep your soil where you found it. So we calculated again from one farmer and realized that one center of excellence, you almost like harvest 50 scotch cars of silt that was returned to the to the arable land. And this is an example from my own farm, yeah, and where we were getting back ourselves onto our land after the rain season. In the dry season, we work very much to clean our contours and bring back ourselves onto our arable land. We have also, farmers, we have implemented water harvesting, have increased production due to availability of moisture even during the dry seasons. This is a very bad season, but this farmer here, you know, it's actually, this farm is being visited by others. They are learning why he was able to produce a crop even during a drought, and what were the practices and why this farmer was successful in a bad year. And we also have soil and water harvesting, improving soil and nutrition, water and nutrition cycles, influencing microclimate. You know, where there is water harvesting and where there is good management of soil, of the soil, you find you actually create a microclimate where your temperatures will always keep stable, and even your vegetation will actually respond to the seasons and not just to stay dormant, but because there's availability of moisture onto your land, your vegetation across your land will be looking very good. So this message has spread to the rest of Zimsoff clusters, and youth, we have the energy to implement it. So we find that the lessons, you know, some farmers coming to learn, and even agri-tech officers, also even some NGOs coming to learn from what we are doing, and spreading this message to the different districts of the country, and which is extension, which is very easy, where farmers just learn from what other farmers are doing and getting that message and implementing it in their own spaces. The lessons, yeah. Effective water harvesting depends on managing the whole landscape through increasing the participation of all the smallholder farmers in that environment. Therefore, it is very important that we have to raise awareness on the value of harvesting runoff to motivate action. What's important is action. Always, you know, this is a lot of work if you look at it from the bird's eye view, but if you are looking at it from the way you are related in a community, it is very, very simple work. You can actually work with your neighbor, and you can do quite a lot of work in terms of creating structures such as bed level contours, earth dams, or even stone barriers. It's very easy if you work together during working parties and the way you would want to organize yourself for an effective job. Like I've talked about that, you know, when you are harvesting water, you are actually also harvesting a silt, which is very, very important soil that we cannot let go, because when runoff is flowing, usually it carries the topsoil, and it is the topsoil that the farmer would like to grow his or her crops. So if it is washed away, you find that there are now some indicators of very poor yields. So it is very important that your work on water harvesting also contributes to your work on harvesting silt and returning that silt to your own productive land. So the extent of the collapse of water cycle in Zimbabwe calls for a bold decision and clear leadership by government and all those involved to commit to reverse to the reversal of this situation. As we are seeing the changes that we are looking at in as far as climate is concerned, that's an indicator that there is a damage to the whole water cycle that we have to start at a very micro level and as individual farmers to work on, and then collectively we can have a very broad impact that can even influence decisions in the government and even policymakers to look at this issue seriously. So the challenges and opportunities, and you would find in our country there is no guiding policy to support water harvesting at micro catchment areas. Government water sector policy focuses on constructing and maintaining medium to large size dams and water supplies to satisfy present and future water requirements, whereby yet if you look at it, you know, this broad kind of look at harvesting water at micro level and establishing a very big dam somewhere downstream as farmers, we have observed that it is not very much a conclusive kind of a strategy, but it is very, very important to look at the individual farmers, the way they are relating to their water cycles within their own environment, and the way they are putting an effort in as far as trying to harness that runoff that can actually happen within their arable land, especially when you clear the land for food production. There must be some structures that have to guard yourselves. There must be some structures that have to guard that water that is flowing onto your land so much that it can be used in the future for other reasons. So despite all that good practices by smallholder farmers, there's a lack of coordinated and collaborative approach by all stakeholders in order to address water harvesting from a micro to macro level. There's still a lot of some kind of disjointed efforts, but as we look at the benefits of this kind of work on the ground, it is very, very important to bring together all the different experiences, especially by the farmers, because the farmers on the land, they are doing quite a lot of work. Are we coming to see what these farmers are doing, and are we tapping from their experiences, and are we trying to bring all the stakeholders that concern the water issue on board so much that we bring out some good work that will harness all the water we may receive at a given rain season. Thank you so much for you listening. I end there. Over to you, Baba.
Great, thanks so much, Nelson. Really, really inspiring, and I think it really illustrates exactly what the water school is all about. I think it's all about sharing these kinds of experiences which are going on, and letting others have access to them. And I think also a very frank sharing. I mean, it's difficulties and facing up to the difficulties, but it's all community driven, it's farmer driven, it's farmers looking at their own situation and working out, of course, drawing and learning from elsewhere, bringing in ideas. Zephaniah Piri was inspirational, and learning from him and bringing all those ideas from elsewhere, but being driven by farmers in their own situation. So fantastic. That was really, really very, very inspiring and useful and practical. So now we'll open it up to questions. You might have questions. There's the chat. People have already put stuff in the chat. If you've got any further comments, please feel free to share if it gets you thinking about your own situation and how you might deal with your situation. So we open now. We've got another up to, we don't have to take the whole time, but we've got up to 40 minutes to have an open discussion now based on that stimulation from Nelson's call. So over to you. You can either, you can put your hand up if you're happy on that, or just unmute and speak. Let's see how it goes. Any? Yeah, Vanessa Bennett. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much, Nelson. That was really inspirational. I found it fascinating because I've joined this group really as an outsider, I suppose, because I'm thinking I'm not sure how we can apply. I certainly can't contribute, but it feels like it's something really important that we should keep an eye on and see what's happening. But it really, Nelson, your presentation really did touch home because it's related to small farmers. And so in the previous meeting, I was thinking it's all very macro information, and I was thinking, how can we apply it to our smallholder farmers? So I have a question, please. One of the biggest challenges that we have working with communities, of course, is getting engagement. And I know it's supposed to come from the community themselves. So Nelson, you're part of that community. And I was just wondering, how did you persuade your neighbours and the rest of the community to invest their time and energy into this?
Nelson, would you like to kind of give a little, it's a big question, but just a few reflections. Thanks.
Yes. You know, it took me something like 5 years before I pronounced to anyone that I'm a professional in agriculture, because I did not have examples that were most like qualifying that status. There is this belief that one has to talk much of it, but what we learned practically was that you need to bring down yourself to the earth and start learning from what you are doing. Yeah, and you start to practice, and you start to showcase, you start to be a guiding torch yourself, and then you talk what you are doing. Right? If you begin to talk what you are doing, people will learn from examples, and they will learn from your speeches wherever you will be talking from, and then that will gradually build some kind of trust, some kind of recognition, and some kind of being understood by the rest of the community, and then it becomes very easy for you to convince the rest of the members of the community to learn from your examples. And that's the strategy that we actually developed. If you listen, when I started that, we graduated from rhetoric. There is this tendency of many of us to talk quite a lot about it and forget that we need to be also like the practitioners are doing, and then we start to experience it, and then as we experience it, then we are able to convince other farmers elsewhere and who might be interested to learn from ourselves. I don't know whether that answers.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Nelson. Vanessa, sorry, Juliet.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to find out from Nelson how long the harvested water lasts him during the year. Do they have it until the next season, or it's just there for a period of time?
And I think this links to another question in the chat, where Neva's asking, how are you reducing the high rates of evaporation and seepage? So I think, yeah, that would be interesting. Is the water staying there, or is it more to sort of get it to seep into the soil?
When the season is very good, like this past season, we had water until June, right? Especially in the earth dams, because they're quite big. Yeah? They can contain some volume, and then they can stay with water until maybe June, July, right? If it's the dead level contours, they would dry up, especially maybe soon after the rainfall. You start to see the dead level contours drying up, but much of this moisture goes into the soil, and if you are plowing downstream, you'll find there is lots of moisture that is within your soil. So this rest of this moisture is actually kept into your soil, and this creates some kind of a micro climate around yourself. Like, for example, right now, much of our trees are still very green. This is an indicator that there is moisture under the soil, and to some extent, you would find the response of the tree to the changing weather pattern also is an indicator of the availability of moisture. When it's dry, trees quickly lose their leaves. But when there is enough moisture, trees don't quickly just drop off their leaves, particularly the deciduous trees, vegetation that we have in this area, where we have mostly the combretum tree species. They usually lose when winter is coming, they lose tree. But this time you find, because of the heavy rains that we got, some are still very, 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 very green. So for us to reduce the rate of evaporation, we are introducing a lot of tree planting and also saving the indigenous tree vegetation that we found into the area. We are not champions in cutting down trees. We want to save as much as possible. Where there is ground cover, there are trees always the rate of evaporation is very low because the trees will be covering and giving a shade to that particular area. So where you find the earth dams, we've let all the grass species almost like covering to the ground so much that we also put some kind of a mulch, living mulch, that will contribute again to reducing the rate of evaporation. And in our arable land, we have some portions again where we're doing quite a lot of mulching to also contain that little moisture. But over and above, the region is very, very dry, if you remember the 400 millimeters that I've mentioned.
Great, thanks. And I think a strong part of your presentation came over to me was that this water harvesting is part of an overall strategy to restore the land, and so it's not the water harvesting fits in with all of that as well. There was just one question. You were talking about mulch, and there was a question in the chat saying challenges in getting mulch. Any quick reflections on that, Nelson, about mulching and so on?
Mulching was very difficult to get. 2019, 2020, it was very difficult. You know, lots of termites, they almost like cut off all the grasses. But this season we have lots of grass. Here we have our local bylaws. We don't encourage field fires. We always want to try to have the grass growing, and our cattle in particular, they benefit very much from that. So we always want to control field fires. So that is another source of mulch. And as the trees are losing their leaves in winter, it's also a very important source of mulch at a household that has lots of different other tree species. So you collect all this and you use it to where it is needed.
I wanted to add one thing about the loss of water through evaporation. So one of the things that's happening in India, where these the smaller than check dams and water bodies are built, that they are beginning to plant a lot of trees around the edges, and they're planting useful to the community. So some trees are actually fruit trees, etc. So they shade the water, they stop the evaporation loss, as well as, of course, provide, when the leaves fall, the mulch, and then the fruit, etc. So the challenges of holding the water in land in hot climes it's just so clear. They're so similar, and the ways to deal with them are so similar too. So yes, thanks, Nelson.
Great. I see Neva's written a long piece. I think his connection may be difficult when he was introducing. I don't know if you want to, there's all sorts of information there about the situation in Zimbabwe and lots of useful stuff there. I mean, I think the difference between evaporation and transpiration is an interesting one to think about, because I think it's what we want to try and transition towards is less evaporation and much more transpiration, because the transpiration cools the earth, and so I think, yeah, there's an interesting connection there, and the whole idea of small water cycles and so on. But that's exactly what they're doing in Shashe, is bringing all of that back. Any more thoughts or questions or ideas that jump to mind, or things you'd like to jump in? And you can also bring up, if you've got any questions about the water school as well, you might like to ask. Anyone further? I mean, this will be, what we're hoping is that to be able to put this presentation onto the water school, and then the idea is to build up more and more of these, and then be able to access them and see where they are on the map, and also have some, maybe towards the end of our call, Philip will introduce some background information so that anyone looking at this online can see what the situation is in that particular area, and then what are the strategies being used, so that we can have this cross-continental learning from each other. Of course, every context is completely unique, but there's lots of ideas and possibilities that we can learn from each other.
I also wanted to add here that the various different methods, Nelson, that you shared, like the dead level contours, the keyhole, the holes, the stone barriers, these are, and then the earthen check dams that we shared from India last time. So these are exactly what we will share how to, in hopefully a language neutral format, for farmers to be able to access, understand, and use the method that is relevant to them. That we found was a very huge gap, that community successfully using a simple method to hold water on their landscape. It's wonderful when you can share it in person, and of course it is the the community coming together or hearing about it, the Bush Telegraph, there's something successful happening there, can we do it? But also globally, more and more communities are needing to look at reviving their water cycles, and this wisdom, when available, these methods is what we want to make available via the Water School, so that they're available globally. So in time, you will see them coming up, in addition to, of course, the impacts, the wonderful presentations, and that accessibility as we are moving more and more online. So in person, yes, locally, but online, this would be then a global resource for anybody to access.
Great, thanks, Minnie. And